So I'm starting tonight on page bottom of 42, going on to 43. The Master is about to conclude this gathering that's taken place. There's been a lot of instruction given, questions asked, and seemingly lots of answers given. Those who've been listening have heard something very unusual, very rare, this direct teaching. And he's translated or reinterpreted many of their practices in such a way as that they can still do them, but do them with a different approach or attitude. This direct teaching of the mind, and coming from what we call the mind ground instead of using them as external devices, seeking for responses from outside their own person and their own nature. So it's a very powerful Dharma he's given them, and at the same time very practical and accessible. The last verse he's giving here, he calls it an unconditioned verse. We wrestled with how to translate this. It's in Chinese, it's wuxiang, literally without mark or appearance. It means, and sometimes it's translated as markless, but that's never conveyed anything to me. A markless verse just doesn't ring. What it means is this is coming from the true mind, the awakened mind. It's not coming through discursive consciousness. Even though it's using words and language, it is pointing to something beyond words and language. It's not conditioned in the sense by time or place or person, but has applicability and significance through all of those. And so without marks means it's not characterized by the limitations of a time, a place, a people, a culture, anything like that. So we chose to use unconditioned, even though I don't think that's ideal either. But whoever works on the next translation hopefully can find something better. Then he gives a very important passage here before he starts the verse, which is, they've never really heard this before. It's very rare. Many people probably don't understand it. Those who are there who are getting it are not sure how to exactly put it into practice because it's so new. And frankly, it's so about me. This is one case you could say it's all about you. It's all about me, because he's saying it is. It's all about you. That's where Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come from you, from your own cultivation. So there's a tendency when one has an exposure to a teaching like that, especially coming through someone who is obviously very endowed with virtue and qualities of person and character, that we have to see between the lines. This is not made explicit in the text, but if you look at it, the responses people are having, the intensity with which they ask their questions and listen, and especially in the chapters coming up when you see what are called lively encounters, where you see his interactions with students and people who aren't students that come, some of them move to tears and so forth. We have to assume that not just the principles of the words, but the person and the character of this individual is a Dharma in itself. It's almost like a living sutra. And so when you hear something like this, it's very powerful and in a sense disturbing, because now you have no place to rely except on your own cultivation. So this can be both liberating and a little bit scary. And there's a sort of vulnerability produced, and he'll go into this later when he gives the three refuges. He's saying, open up your hearts, let go, and be really true and real, and you'll have no problem. And in saying that, there would be then a tendency to want to be near and stay near that light or the energy of that teacher. And at this point, he's sort of saying goodbye. He said, I've given you all you really need, and I'm going to be leaving now. And we see this throughout the text. He comes together with some of the disciples or whatnot, and then he leaves before he gives his teaching. And he gives as much teaching as they need, and then he leaves so they don't become dependent on him, instead of, again, putting it into practice themselves. So here he says, and I think it's implied in here, if you accord with these final instructions I'm going to give you, which really are just a summary of what he's taught so far, you will always be as if by my side. If that's what you're concerned about, you want to be, and it doesn't mean personally you want to be sticky with him, but you want to be near that light and energy because it's so sustaining and so powerfully supportive. And he said, you don't have to. If you put this into practice, you're right by my side. On the other hand, he says, if you go into the way place now and ordain and become a monk or nun, even if you're by my side, it's we're 1,000 miles apart. So this is really, if you understand this verse, you really get the relationship between the mentor and the student, which is a catalyst. It's not a crutch. It's something that catalyzes something in you. Once that's activated, the teacher just naturally pulls away, and you naturally go, you don't sink, because you now know how to flap your wings or, pedal your whatever metaphor you want to use here. Use your legs, pedal your, whatever. You can do it on your own. It's time to fly. I watch this every summer up at Maine. We have the eagles nesting on our point, and there's always a batch of usually 2 new eagles. And they hang around that nest, and they hang around that nest, and they hang around the nest, and mommy, daddy comes, feeds them fish, and so on and so forth. And then every once in a while, they stand on the edge of the nest, put their chest out and do this, and then they go back inside again. And this goes on for quite a while, and everybody's thinking, when are they going to take off? And then finally, on one day, the parent kind of nudges I guess the strongest one, or the stupidest one, to the edge, and spreads his wings, and he takes off. And then comes up, makes it across to the next island, and there's this cacophony in the nest, but also in the whole forest. The loons are squeaking, the geese are squeaking, we're all squeaking and shouting, and suddenly, and then it's gone. The bird is gone. It's on its own. It can fly now. And then it takes care of itself. It can't stay in that nest forever. So even if you find a good teacher and you have that relationship, ultimately, even with a teacher and student, all that comes together must come apart, must separate. So there's no way to get away from this phenomenon. But sometimes we come together and we separate and there's no learning. There's no learning curve here. I'm not going to go into details what that might be like or what you call those relationships, but there's also relationships that you can come together for a very short period of time and depart, and you have something that sustains you for the whole of your life. So here we're talking about he's established a relationship. And this is going to happen throughout. And these are relationships of caring. They're relationships of emotion and real passion. These are not cold, impartial, robotic relationships as we sometimes imagine. These are almost paternal, maternal, fraternal. So this is real close. And at the same time, they're close in that the family transmission is Dharma. It's not progeny. It's not a business. It's passing on the Dharma. And the most important thing about Dharma is it liberates you. It liberates you. So when you're liberated, you don't want to lean on anything else. You don't need to lean on anything else, and it feels unhealthy to lean on anything else. That's how you know if it's Dharma. If you're wanting to lean, to attach, to grab, there's something lacking. As long as you got that, you're okay. So he's saying now, even if you don't have it, I'm giving you this verse. This is all you need, because you put this into practice, you're fine. But hanging around me forever, or me hanging around you, is not going to do it. So these teachers do not want to build up a large retinue of followers. They're not like, what do you call them? They don't want groupies, okay? They don't want a whole bunch of people following them around from place to place. They really want them to do their own. So now he gives this verse. The verse often are given as repetitions of the prose section that came before. In the earliest text, all of which were passed along in an oral tradition, there wasn't anything written down in these teachings until somewhere between 300 to 400 years after the Buddha's passing, both in the Theravada and the Mahayana. There's nothing written. So these are passed along by word of mouth, and therefore they have to be memorized. And the verses help. They're a mnemonic device for memorization. So sometimes different people would memorize different parts of it, and then they get together, they could recite the whole thing. But the verse tradition has to do with making points of the text that are essential easy to hold in mind, easy to memorize. Prose is harder. So in this one, he's giving the verses, and they rhyme and they have rhythm. I think we did this last week, didn't we? And then we did the clunky English translation, which doesn't have rhyme or rhythm. So that being said, he's going to go through, and we're going to read these tonight. So he starts, first off, he says, "The mind regulated and subdued, why toil following rules? Your steps straight and true, what use is sitting in meditation?" So here, you can see this is a summary. One summary is he's saying the precepts, that's the rules. So in the Chinese, I believe this is jie, the character, which we translated rules because it has to do with a discipline in yourself. Specifically, here to this group, he's probably referring to what are called the 5 precepts, Panchashila. In Sanskrit, it means refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, sexual misconduct, lies and deception, and intoxicants. But he's saying, if your mind is regulated and subdued, in other words, if you have brought your mind in harmony with your nature, your essential nature, and you're at home, so to speak, you're dwelling in the place of no dwelling, which is your true home, you're totally centered and balanced, you're not even, at this point, having thoughts arise, having feelings arise that overstep the bounds of this sense of centered propriety and so forth. He said, if you're in that place, you are naturally precepted. Precepts only come about because we lose our bearings, and they're meant to reorient. They're like a compass to help us reorient. Once you're reoriented, you don't need the compass anymore. In the same way, once you're regulated and subdued, you've cultivated yourself to this point, these so naturally hold themselves that you wouldn't even think of needing to take them. But, again, there's a conditional. If you are, then. I can remember hearing this quoted as a second line. You know, the second line of both these verses was used in the 60s. Why toil following rules? What use sitting in meditation? And it was meant, I'm already a Buddha, I'm already awakened, because I have the whole nature. But the first line was always a little bit missing. What did that mean to be regulated and subdued? So this is the first part. The second part has to do with your steps straight and true, and we put in quotation marks steps, because this means, it's poetic, meaning you're walking, but it's really referring to everything you do with body, mouth, and mind. It's the 3 karmas in action. So if you are in your actions straight and true, then there's no use in sitting in meditation, because meditation is meant to help you gather back in, reflect upon, and correct your steps. Meditation is not to pull you out of active, engaged living, but it's to center and balance your active, engaged living in such a way that inside and outside, sitting in meditation, walking, standing, sitting, lying down, are all in the same. This is what he calls a single practice samadhi. So again, meditation is only a corrective device that we use if we have misstepped, if we're not balanced and centered, and we're not able to listen to ourselves and pay attention to the voice, quotation marks, okay, I don't want you to think we're going to go home and hear voices, but to the voice, quotation mark, of your own heart, your own nature. If you are in tune with that at all times, you don't need to sit in meditation, because you're never out of meditation. You're never out of the centering awareness. Now, meditation, again, here he's talking about it, not withdrawal from reality, but a centering within reality and seeing things as they really are, not denying or pulling away from things as they really are. That is, he never calls that meditation. If you can be centered in the midst of the things as they really are, you're in samadhi. And if you're sitting here and you can't be, inside it's wild and you're thinking left, right, up, down, then you're not in samadhi, even though it looks like it's samadhi. So he's moving these both again to the mind ground. He goes on. Gratitude, and then colon, is being filial and supporting your parents. Righteousness, being sympathetic to those above and below. So if you look at this as a template, the first 2 lines here refer to yourself, what you're doing yourself. You regulate and subdue your mind, your thinking, and your steps and straight and true your actions. It's about you. Now the next one goes into a section on others. So these next 4 lines are referring to how would you be then for others. So he's giving a very practical thing here. He's saying, I'm leaving, do this. Get your mind straight into regulated and subdued. You're in the way then, not in the way, an obstruction, in the Tao, let's say, then you're a person of the way with no mind, because you don't have to have a mind because you're already naturally responsive and centered. Now he's going to, how do you treat others? How are you to others? So the first line, gratitude is being filial and supporting your parents. We have to look at this really carefully because it's very easy to misinterpret this, at least some of my students who have been brought up steeped in filial piety or filial devotion or reverence and so forth have somehow gotten the notion that this means obeying your parents no matter what. And that's not what filial means here. Your relationship to your parents, like every relationship, has to use discernment and has to use balance and has to use critical judgment. If your parents are off, what good is it to be imitating them and following them? And if they're right on, what good is it to rebel? So you can't go either way here. What filial means is, at one level, my teacher gave a really good way to cultivate this. He said, with your parents, with others, with every situation you enter, you ask yourself, if it's the Tao, the way, I advance and continue to move forward. If it's not the Tao, the way, I pull back. Now, pulling back doesn't mean reject. It means I pull back to my position and reassess how I would enter into a situation, sort of with my parents. And he said, therefore, when you have, say, let's use it with the parents here, his model was, if there's something good and wholesome in that relationship, feed it. Make it grow. And if there's something that isn't good or wholesome in that relationship, try to start it up. Try to bring it up. Try to create it, as hard as that might seem. And then on the other side, if there's something negative and unwholesome, even evil, not to say dysfunctional, in that relationship, do not feed it. Do not augment it. Do not go into it and make it larger. And if there's no evil and unwholesomeness in that relationship, then don't create it. Don't bring it up. So it's a fourfold thing. But you see, in each one of those, you have to use discernment. So how do you know? He says, how do you not know? If you attend to your nature, you attend to your true self, you will know what is wholesome, what is right, and then you foster it or bring it up if it's not there. And if it's the opposite, you pull back from it, you don't feed it, and in some cases, be careful not to give rise to it. So I think this is actually sort of wise counsel in the sense that it doesn't ignore that not all relationships between children and their parents are Disneyland. Really sweet, good night, Mom, good night, Dad, read the story, see you in the morning, oh, don't want to wake you up too early, were you warm last night? No, come on, we're in a real world here. There's a lot of dysfunction and actually abuse that goes on between these relationships. And this isn't limited to parents and children, by the way. It's others, but let's focus on what he's saying, filial. So in this sense, what he's saying is your primary devotion, as he says later, when you take refuge with the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you're taking refuge with the Buddha of your own nature, with the truth of your own nature, with the purity of your own nature. So the parent filial thing is you're taking your parents to be that which is proper, nurturing, upright, wholesome, bringing you along. Those principles as embodied in people. Okay? But if it's not that way, you yourself have responsibility to not just be swept along in that. So what I'm saying here, this is not what a lot of my students thought was, I have to do what my parents tell me to do, no matter what. That's not what's being promoted here. And in fact, you would be in violation of your nature and the way if you did things that went against that, no matter who it was in obedience to your teacher, to your friends, to your parents, or anybody. So again, the responsibility falls back to be discerning here. Okay? Now, there's a Mahayana version of this. It's very interesting that you do. As you expand the measure of your consciousness, or I will say, let go of that which is constricting it, your compassion and insight opens up naturally, and you start to see that my parents are not, as the text says, simply those who gave birth to me in this particular life, but they're all who are nurturing me now in the present, all who have nurtured them and me in the past, and in a sense, I am a parent too to all those who I'm nurturing. So teachers are parents. Your parents to your friends. Your parents to your relationships. You know, this is talking about a nurturing up, how shall I say, agenda-free nurturing. In other words, I'm not nurturing you so you'll come out in the image and likeness I have in mind for you to be. But I'm nurturing you with the hopes that you will manifest for what you're supposed to be. And so that's a parenting role. This parenting thing is not just a biological thing, but it's an attitude, a frame of mind. The Brahma Sutra has this wonderful passage. It says, all earth, air, fire, and water, all the elements that make up nature, and all the elements that make up us, have been, are, or will be part of, or the completeness of my own body. So in the past, they have been, and now they've scattered again, or they are right now, and they'll scatter in the future, or they will be. So there's this web of interconnectedness with all the elements. So here's a real profound environmental ethic if you think about this. I am, in fact, interrelated through earth, air, fire, and water to all of matter and energy in the universe and all of the beings. Therefore, it says, I will protect and this matter and energy. I will take care of it. And then the text says, and all living beings have been, are, or will be parents to me. And therefore, I will take up the practice of liberating living beings. Now, this is very interesting to say loving living beings. It says liberating living beings. Love could be a part of liberation, but it could also be a part of non-liberation. But the liberating means I will bring them to their fullest potential. I will allow them to be their fullest potential, which is totally awakened, free, uninhibited, and so forth in this dharmic sense. So the Mahayana version says your parents, in a sense, are only little relational nurturing beings in your universe of parents. This thing extends infinitely. So when you look at it that way, then it becomes a basis for really what's called the heart of great compassion. All beings are my parents. Therefore, even if your parents are gone, you're still in relationship to your parents because all that they have touched and instilled in you is still with you. And everything that you're passing on of them through you is with somebody else. So this is an unbroken chain. And that's why you start to think, okay, so what is good in me, I better kind of support. And what is not good, I want to bring up. And what is bad in me, I want to not feed. And what's not there, I don't want to bring up. Because in bringing it up in you or supporting you, you are bringing it up and extending it out infinitely, past, present, and future. So it's an interesting contemplation. Righteousness, being sympathetic to those above and below. This has to do, the righteousness here has to do with a fairness, this sense of I am a fair person. I act from principle and not from partiality or from personality or trying to manipulate. I treat somebody this way and somebody that way based on what's called instrumental ethics or instrumental virtue. You familiar with that phrase? One of the lawyers is nodding, but not everybody else is. Okay. Instrument. What's an instrument?
It's a means to ends.
Yeah, it's like a fork's an instrument, right? So you use the instrument to get to something you want to do. A wrench is an instrument. So when you treat your actions as instrumental, you're doing them with the hope of getting something back. You're using them in an instrumental way to leverage something. Okay? I'm good to you because you got a lot of money. I'm not so good to you because you don't. I'm good to you because you say nice things about me and get me positions. You, on the other hand, lie or you tell the truth, and then and I don't get those things. And so I'm setting up a world not based on righteousness, but based on partiality, and that's called instrumental. Here it means intrinsic ethic or intrinsic virtues is you do that for its own sake because it's the right thing to do. Not necessarily because it will be an advantage to you. And sometimes it might not be a seeming advantage. I disagree with that argument that people say, oh, you have to take a loss. Sometimes you have to take a loss and be honest. I don't believe that. Because I think in the end, being dishonest is its own loss. Even though you might get temporary gain from it, in the end you end up corrupting your soul, and that's all you got. When it comes time to die, you're doing your last breath, what you got or what you didn't get won't matter much, but who you are and how you've been will matter a whole lot. So he's actually right on to something here. Deference, now the next 4 lines, again dealing with relationships. High and low, showing mutual respect. And this deference is, again, along the idea of respect, but it means that you do not single out people because of their caste, their education, their gender, their age. What else could we go into? Their intelligence, their abilities or disabilities. You have an attitude towards all that these are living beings like myself who wish to live and thrive like I wish to live and thrive, and I treat them all the same. This is what deference means. It doesn't mean a false kind of bowing, but it means an equal accessibility, an equal approach. That's what deference means. The opposite is, oh, come on, gee, imagination. Let's see, what's the opposite? Hubris, arrogance, condescension, hoity-toity, okay, whatever you want to call it. And patience, this is very interesting. What is patience? Not gossiping about everyone's wrongs. I don't know why they throw that in, because it's really not much of a human problem. You never see this. You certainly see it in high office and people running for office. They don't do that. So I don't know where this would come in. But it's interesting here, patience has to do with, why would it say not talking about others' wrongs? It means chilling, let it be. Let it be. The impatience is, you feel you have to control or direct it, either anticipating something that's going to move against you or moving against something so it works in your favor. He's just saying, let it be. Let people be. Do not judge. So patience is actually the opposite of judgmentalism. It's very interesting. And judgmentalism is a kind of impatience because you're not letting things be. This patience doesn't mean you just sit over and let things roll on top of you. It's not a passive thing. It's an open thing. It's an unattached attitude. It's very accepting. At the same time, you don't say that there aren't faults there. You just simply don't get into a judgmental coming down on them. In these things, if you do the opposite, you say, ingratitude is not being filial and supporting your parents and others. Unrighteousness is the lack of sympathy shown to those above and below. The lack of deference is that you do not show mutual, you have a lot of partiality. And the constant gossiping and looking at others' faults is the judgmentalism and the non-patience. So you can reverse these. There was one time I worked with severely emotionally disturbed kids, and these kids were very, very hard to get along with. I mean, they had mastered behavior so negative that within 5 seconds of being around any one of them, you would be crawling the walls. Now, you're saying that's hard to imagine, but, they were good. They were very good. These are kids that were either in gangs, who were abandoned by their parents, who were burning down shopping centers, who had been in and out of foster care, who had harmed, some of them severely harmed others, who didn't love themselves, who were sexually promiscuous at 5 and 6 years old. Let me go through the list. They didn't bathe, they didn't wash themselves, they loved nobody, including themselves, and so every encounter was a negative encounter and so forth. And I jumped into the middle of this, I am going to save these children. Not. And so my first encounter was, I just had this, I guess you'd say, what's that, Mary Poppins type, approach to this, being a liberal progressive and whatnot, and the noble savage, and, da-da-da. And my first 2 days on the job, I was just about ready to bail, because there was no way to generate a positive feeling towards these kids because they were so afraid of being open again that they closed every avenue to the heart. And so there was no way there. And as soon as you gave a gesture to get in, they immediately, at one hand, wanted to open, and they closed it because they once burned, twice shy. So they weren't going to open their hearts again. And they also closed it to say, oh, I bet you're a Berkeley liberal do-gooder, and you're here to be good for a week, and then you're going to go. Or, I want to see what you're made of, man. You really got a good heart? Well, take this mashed potatoes in your face. Huh. You know, are you going to beat me? Are you going to hit me? So this was going on 24/7. Even at sleep time, you go to sleep, they would get up, start a fire in the house. You know, you'd smell the smoke, and they'd be out there nude, cooking marshmallows on the rug. You go, oh, God, no. Let me see, Manual on Raising Children, page 27, what do I do here? And so there was a really kind older psychologist who was working with me, and he said, you're not going to last unless you find something positive in these kids to relate to. And I thought, are you joking? Are you joking? And he said, you have to find, as no matter how small it is, even if they have their teeth straight, you say, my, what wonderful straight teeth you have. And you say it sincerely, and you find that one thing, and he says, if you can you can hook one positive thing, you have a way to go forward. But you cannot just bounce off all this negativity. They said, keep looking and looking. And sure enough, you know, this was the Holmes looking for clues, but every once in a while, you could find some little quality. And then you would say something nice, and you meant it. And that kid would like, huh. So, the saying, these here have very practical applications, but the thing mostly I would say of all of these, besides impartiality and so forth, is to relate to people in ways that you are seeing those sides of them and not judging. Not judging. Because actually the judgmentalism doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for you because it makes you feel righteous, higher, and not. And they feel, you know what I'm saying? So even if you establish something with the judgmentalism, and this is the next line is very appropriate. If rubbing sticks fire, then a red petal lotus can surely spring from the mud. This is not talking about sticks and flowers and mud. Okay. Sticks together is your own self-cultivation. In other words, you rub, you polish, take your klesha. What? Right. Because by rubbing that, you get rid of those edges. You start the fire of enlightenment, of awakening. So the fire of Bodhi doesn't come through a divine spark of lightning, but it comes from rubbing the sticks of your own nature. And where those sticks have edges and whatnot, by rubbing, by persistence in that way, you start a fire, and the wood turns into fire. And the fire turns into light, and it fills, and then the sticks are gone. This is afflictions of Bodhi. So that's where he's saying. So then he said, the red petal lotus can surely spring from the mud. The lotus is our awakened mind. It's the Bodhi mind. And it comes, interestingly, from the mud of our afflictions. It comes from, and there's another parallel here, it comes out of this world and our relationships here and now. So just as this wonderful flower, I remember it was in Thailand, I saw it for the first time, you're coming in and there's these ditches filled with garbage and debris and just oil slicks and everything. And right on top, about an inch above the water, are these beautiful lotus flowers. It's really amazing. It's not just the mud, it's all the human debris that's in that water and muck, but those lotus flowers are just a little bit above. They don't leave, they come out of that. But still, and this is a beautiful metaphor for us, that we come out of the conditions of our human existence to become awakened. It's not by denying that human existence or running away from it. And so it's actually a relationship between the two. So this is what this parallel, and he's again pointing it back. He's saying, don't weary of this task and don't look outside. Now the next line, I don't know, is this used as in Chinese medicine?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Definitely.
Okay. I had a Tui Na. Do you know what Tui Na is? It's legalized torture. I didn't. It's just short of waterboarding. It's a Chinese medicine technique they call acupressure. Well, it's not acupressure. It's torture. They use their knuckles. They use their thumbs. These thumbs are trained. These are martial can break rocks. And they go in, and sometimes they have little things. They're cute. They look like little bones or curved things to get even more pressure in. And they move on. Okay? And where it hurts, they drill in. And it's good for you. So my Tui Na person who's doing this, at the first half hour, he's going, what are you doing to me? No pain, no gain. Which is bitter medicine, or good medicine bitter to the taste. Okay, I just had it done again today. I thought I'd go to another Chinese doctor because they, it can't be this way. And so he's doing this, he's doing that, and he says, oh, look at that, this lump there. Yeah. And really like, yeah. I'm going, ah! He says, first we loosen, then we stick a needle and get it going, whoa. So I really understand after today the truth of good medicine is bitter to the taste. This also refers to the herbs. So when you get the herbal medicine, it also will have, it's not like chocolate milk, okay? Now, the message here is based on Chinese medicine. On the other hand, Western medicine overdoses with barbiturates and painkillers. So they say, any pain we smother, which is one approach to it. The problem with that is now we become addicted to painkillers. We become addicted to pleasure and aversive to any kind of pain. So any pain and discomfort, and we immediately try to get away from by covering over. That's why in the same place in Maine where I go, which is a beautiful, idyllic place, there is a huge epidemic of OxyContin and heroin addiction. And you're trying to think, why? Because in those areas, this has become the sort of drug of choice for anesthetizing experience. And so it's not just in the cities now, it's all in upper New England. And even my home state of Wisconsin is plagued by this. And it's not just the down and out. These are the upper middle class, people, kids and whatnot. And so, and the availability of this stuff is, I forget what the statistics are, but for every American, there's like hundreds of thousands of painkillers each year produced. And they're distributed literally like candy. You can go in and say, oh man, I just stubbed my toe. Well, we give you some oxycodone and take the pain away. And you get a bottle, you take one, and what do you do with the rest? Well, your niece says, I'll take it off your hands. Okay. I digress. So good medicine is bitter to the taste. It's not always the case that sweet-tasting medicine is good, conversely. And then, of course, the parallel here is good advice often hurts the ears. Now, this is, I think, maybe talking about, if we go on from self to others, this is hinting about the good knowing advisor. This is the student-teacher relationship here. The student-teacher relationship is a therapeutic one in Buddhism. Now, therapeutic in the sense that the purpose of the teacher is to provide the medicines that cure the student of the illnesses of greed and anger and stupidity. And therefore, in applying these, it's often not sweet. It's not flattery you'll get. It could be criticism. It could be even a scolding. And the advice you hear, if it's pointing to your deepest flaws, your deepest character flaws, or Chinese call maobing, and shiqi, your habitual energies, they're often the ones that you either don't recognize or you've covered over so skillfully that they're almost inaccessible. And then we surround ourselves with friends who mutually support the opposite and agree almost complicitly not to mention those things to us, right? And so what the teacher is doing is purposely, I guess like the Chinese doctor I had today, going below the surface to find the points where there's blockage and clog and working to open up. It hurts. It's not smooth. But then I have to admit, now you could say because it's, what's that you release when you have pain? Same thing when you do hot food. Endorphins. You could say by pounding me in this way, the endorphins are released, and I say, well, I feel better. No, but what happened was he released the blockage, gave the acupuncture, and I feel better, and that pain's gone. So, but if you said, do you want to go with me and be hurt this afternoon, but I wouldn't have gone. I sort of got lured in there with the idea that I would feel better, which is true in the end, but they didn't tell the first part. Anyhow, what it's saying here is the teacher often will do things, say things, even ignoring you, that is not easy to take, but it's done in this context of providing medicine that is liberating. And so when you're looking for a good teacher, you don't necessarily want to find one, or you're looking for a good group of people to practice with, where you have people that are fawning and flattering and telling you how great you are. Nor do you want the judgmentalism either. It's like, that's right, at our place we don't fawn and flatter. We point out all your faults and we nail you to the wall, and it's only for your own good that we're doing this. You don't want that either. You want to feel when it's done that even though it stung a little bit, it was coming from a good heart and it touched you in a constructive way. Those two things. You have to feel it's coming from good heart and not from an agenda or some displaced aggression or some passive aggressive or anything like that. You have to feel, gosh, that person did mean me well. And their overall behavior has to show that. Then it can be received, even though it's hard to take. And then it has to have that therapeutic effect on you. Otherwise, it's not. So to point out somebody's faults at the right time is good medicine. To point them out at the wrong time is destructive. Especially if they have no way to change, they have no handle. Then it becomes judgmental and it becomes dismissive and pushing away. So the skill of what you say, constructive versus destructive criticism, constructive versus destructive praise, has to be skillfully done. All of these you can see, the filiality, the deference, this kind of thing, all require discernment. You have to be aware and attuned to the intention with which you're doing and the effect it has both. So how can you zone out and meditate and be cultivating if those antennae are not vibrating all the time? And especially how you treat yourself. Okay. Oh, we're out of time. So we'll save this good part for next week. See, did I promise this? I did, didn't I? I promised we'd finish this chapter this week. Well, reforming your failings is the next line. So if I reform my failings, eventually I'll get some wisdom here. We'll finish. We'll go back into this next week and hopefully get through it. Since there's some really, really good stuff here. And some stories coming up because it's one of the occult. Brings to mind a number of stories. So well, we'll stop here for tonight. We're going to meet, today's the 4th, so we'll meet on the 14th. The 11th? Oh, 7 days. And then, and the 18th, and then we'll take a break for the winter break. So the 18th will be the last class. I promise you we'll be done with this chapter by the 18th. We may even finish next week. And then we'll break until, when do the classes start again?
January, well, for you only. February 6th if you want. Else January 30th.
Okay, so, well, I don't know. It depends on how many Chinese doctors beat me in between. But maybe.
Usually start the second week because it takes a while for you to get used to CTV. So February 6th.
Okay. These are my good advisors, basically saying you're out of sync when you're gone for a week, and then it takes another 2 weeks to get you going again. everybody who's not on the mailing list maybe want to get on the mailing list so that you could just check. Wouldn't there be a calendar thing that you could send out, people would know then? I suppose you could call and check here, but just to be sure, we usually take about 4 or 5 weeks off. So we may not start so late as February, but we'll see how it goes. But check the list to see.
How do you get on the list?
Just your email either to Yanni or I.
Okay.
We are every,
Who? Yeah, well, no, see, stand up so people can see, because that's, yeah. That's Yan Lin. You thought he was a computer. He's not. So if you give it to Yan Lin or Alan, then you can be on the list and you'll have the dates. Okay, any announcements on things coming up? Did you finally get the connection?
Yeah.
Okay.
And next weekend we have the Untitled recitation session here today.
By the way, there will be a winter retreat at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. Cold, but bitter medicine good to the taste. And then the chant expression, how will the plum blossoms smell so fragrant if they don't endure the bitter cold? You're the plum blossoms. There'll be an Amitabha session and then probably a 3-week chant coming up. So if you're interested in doing that, diving in a little more deeply, that's a way to do it during the winter break. Let's see if there was something else. Chant sessions coming up, Amitabha sessions coming up. Oh, and I wanted to tell you, I told you when you get in touch with Hung Shui that he's going to do the animals in Australia. So, and you didn't get in touch and everything. No, he's going to do that. Okay. So Hung Shui sends me an email and he says, open the link first. So I click on the link and there's this bird, like this, and then a turkey below the bird. And so for about 3 minutes, I have a video clip of a turkey and a bird. And then finally, Hung Shui says, hi. and the bird, he gets the bird going, and the bird is it's a bird we used to sing about when I was in school, and I never knew what they were talking about. You're in school in Wisconsin. They don't have Australian birds, but you sing these funny songs from all over the world. So our song was, Kookaburra up in the old gum tree, Mary, Mary, me, king of the bushes, he laughed, Kookaburra laughed, such a gay bird is he, and we're going, yeah, and we'd sing it. All the parents would come at Christmas time, and we'd go, and the boys and girls are there, Kookaburra up, and the nuns directing us, right, and laugh, and I know what it is. So Hung Shui's got a Kookaburra. And so Hung Shui says, listen, I go, that's the Kookaburra. And then he's got like 30 of them doing this. Now that song that I sang when I was 6 makes sense. But I could see why the nun didn't tell us what that was, because some of us boys would have done in the concert the laugh Kookaburra. So maybe tomorrow night you'll get something like that before the Dharma talk. Oh, a question.
Yeah.
Online?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said, can you elaborate on not being judgmental and not being passive? When you see injustice, do you say something or just chew?
The short answer to that is you act without judgmentalism. It doesn't mean you don't act, but you don't act with an edge. You don't act with an anger, and you don't act with a superior dismissive attitude. You simply do what needs to be done. For example, I'll give you a perfect example. When I came into the Chinese doctor today, he could have said, oh my God, you've got this lump here and you got that lump here and you're eating the wrong foods. You're a bad person. You're really rotten. I don't even know why I bother to treat you. It's hopeless. That's called judgmentalism. He didn't do that. He said, we got some challenges here. And he went right to work and started working. You act, but you don't in them impose a judgmental thing on top of that. So if you think about a good doctor, no matter what the patient comes in with, and he actually took my maladies and turned them to sounding as, he said, look, you've got this illness, but it could be a lot worse. Oh, so I said, the bad I got is not as bad. Yeah, that's right. Or he could have said, you know, you're in sad shape. But he didn't. He said, of all the illnesses you could have, yours is the better of the worst. Yours is the better of the bad. Even that was free of judgmentalism. And so I think what it means, you actually act very skillfully. You don't encumber it with judgmentalism. One, because it makes the patient feel bad and it's unhealthy, they won't heal. But moreover, you carry that inside of you, and that becomes an illness in yourself. And so instead of being free and open, you become heavy, weighted with your judgmentalism. And it actually gets you into the grave a lot sooner than you naturally go. You won't escape it with the lack of it, but you'll go in slower. Okay. We'll do the transference in English.
May every living, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because the hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san bao.
Hi everyone, today